Supreme Governor Zalter of the Cathar Dominion gazed at the holographic display of the Azure Nebula with the cool detachment that characterized the species. The swirling cosmic gases, rich with rare isotopes and exotic matter, represented not beauty but logical necessity, resources the Cathar required for continued technological advancement. The fact that humans maintained a small research outpost near the nebula's eastern quadrant was an inconvenience that could be addressed through superior reasoning. The analysis is conclusive, Zalter announced to his strategic council, his eight-fingered hands folded precisely on the polished obsidian table. Our computational models predict a 94.63% probability that the humans will yield to our territorial claim once they comprehend our superior capacity to extract and utilize the nebula's resources. The council members, their scaled skin reflecting the cool blue light of the chamber, nodded in unison. Like all Cathar, they prided themselves on pure logic and technological supremacy. Emotional species, particularly humans with their unpredictable outbursts and irrational attachments, were considered intellectually inferior and fundamentally flawed in their decision-making processes. Supreme Governor, Ventured Science Director Krell, the human outpost has been established in the region for 47 standard cycles. While insignificant in scope, they may invoke prior claim. Zalter dismissed this concern with a flick of his long, elegant fingers. Prior presence without efficient utilization constitutes waste, not claim. The Cathar Dominion's superior extraction methods will increase resource yield by 2,218% compared to current human operations. The logic is irrefutable. Strategic Commander Mover, responsible for military operations, added, "Our intelligence suggests their outpost is primarily scientific in nature, with minimal defensive capabilities. They maintain only 3 patrol vessels for the entire sector." Then it is decided, Zalter declared, "We shall inform the humans of our claim to the Azure Nebula and expect their compliance with our superior logic." None of the council members questioned this approach. The Cathar had expanded across 12 star systems using this same methodology. Identify valuable resources, establish clear dominion, and expect lesser species to recognize the inevitability of Cathar ascendancy. Resistance was illogical when faced with superior reasoning and technology. 2 solar cycles later, the first diplomatic contact occurred. Human envoy Alastair Finch, a tall man with silver-streaked dark hair and calm, measured speech, appeared via holographic transmission from the human outpost. His diplomatic credentials identified him as a senior representative of the United Earth Diplomatic Corps. Supreme Governor Zalter, Finch began, his tone respectful but firm, "I appreciate your willingness to discuss the situation regarding the Azure Nebula. Earth has maintained research operations in this region for nearly 5 decades, cataloging its unique properties and developing sustainable extraction methods that preserve its scientific value." Zalter observed the human with clinical interest. Finch displayed none of the emotional characteristics the Cathar associated with humans. No visible anger at the Cathar claim, no desperate pleading. This was unexpected, but irrelevant to the outcome. "Envoy Finch," Zalter replied, "the Cathar Dominion has determined that our technological capabilities will allow for optimal resource utilization of the Azure Nebula. Your presence has been noted, but efficiency dictates that operations be consolidated under Cathar administration." Finch's expression remained neutral. "We propose an alternative approach, Governor. Our scientists have developed models for sustainable resource sharing that would benefit both our peoples. The nebula contains sufficient materials to support both human and Cathar interests for centuries, if properly managed." For the next hour, Finch presented detailed proposals. Joint research initiatives, shared extraction zones, mutual defense protocols against cosmic phenomena that occasionally destabilize the nebula. His presentation was thorough, logical, and utterly wasted on Zalter and his council. "Your proposals are noted, Envoy Finch," Zalter stated when the human had finished. "However, they rely on unnecessary complications and inefficient divisions of authority. The Cathar Dominion will proceed with its claim." We expect your research outpost to begin withdrawal procedures within 15 standard cycles. A flicker, perhaps disappointment, perhaps something else, passed across Finch's face before his diplomatic mask returned. Governor Zalter, I urge you to reconsider. We have no desire for conflict, but the Azure Nebula lies within territory recognized by multiple species as under-Earth jurisdiction since our first survey mission 50 years ago. Your jurisdiction is a theoretical construct without practical enforcement, Zalter countered. The Cthar recognize only the logic of optimal resource allocation. This matter is settled. After the transmission ended, Science Director Krell approached Zalter privately. The human showed unusual restraint. Their species typically displays stronger emotional responses to territorial challenges. Zalter's mandibles clicked in what passed for amusement among the Cthar. Perhaps they are learning from superior example. Or more likely, they recognize the futility of resistance and are preparing for withdrawal while maintaining diplomatic pretense. And if they do not withdraw, Krell asked, then we will demonstrate the error in their logic, Zalter replied. Admiral Forlag's expeditionary fleet stands ready to establish our presence in the nebula. The human's emotional nature makes them unpredictable in small matters, but in matters of significant force disparity, they are entirely predictable. They will withdraw rather than face destruction. Admiral Forlag, commander of the Cthar Expeditionary Fleet, shared his supreme governor's confidence. As his flagship, the Inexorable Conclusion led 12 warships into the Azure Nebula. He felt nothing but certainty in their mission success. The Cthar vessels, with their distinctive angular geometry and gleaming metallic surfaces, moved with precision through the colorful cosmic gases. Sensors detecting 5 human vessels near their research outpost, reported his first officer. For appear to be standard research and supply ships, one matches configurations of their patrol vessels. Forlach nodded. As expected, establish our primary extraction control point at these coordinates and begin resource mapping operations. Inform the human vessels they are now operating in Cthar territory and must prepare for departure. The Cthar warships deployed in a geometric pattern that both optimized their sensor coverage and presented an unmistakable show of force. Automated probes launched from their bays, beginning the process of cataloging the nebula's resources down to the molecular level. The response from the human outpost was prompt but unexpected. Rather than showing signs of preparation for withdrawal, the human vessels adjusted their positions to maintain their operational coverage. More surprisingly, sensor readings indicated their shields had been raised to maximum capacity. Admiral, the communications officer reported, we are receiving a transmission from the human outpost. Envoy Finch's face appeared on the command screen, his expression as composed as before. Admiral Forlag, I must formally protest this incursion into Earth-administered space. Our position remains unchanged. We are open to negotiating shared access to the Azure Nebula, but we cannot and will not recognize unilateral Cthar claims to this region. Forlag's inner eyelids flicked with irritation. Your protest is noted, Envoy Finch. However, the Cthar Dominion has determined its course of action. Your continued presence is now interfering with our resource extraction operations. I suggest you begin evacuation procedures immediately. We will do no such thing, Admiral, Finch replied, his tone cooling several degrees. The Azure Nebula Research Station falls under the protection of the United Earth Defense Fleet. We have maintained a peaceful scientific mission here for decades and intend to continue our work. After the transmission ended, Forlag's tactical officer, Lieutenant Kesmer, approached with a data tablet. Admiral, we are detecting unusual energy signatures from the human outpost and their vessels. They appear to be operating at power levels significantly higher than our intelligence suggested. Forlag reviewed the readings with a dismissive gesture. Inefficient human technology. They likely need to overload their systems to maintain shield strength at this level. It merely accelerates the depletion of their resources. Perhaps, Kesmer ventured, but these readings don't align with our existing profiles of human defensive capabilities. There are subspace distortions that our sensors cannot fully classify. Their technology is known to be erratic compared to our refined systems, Forlag replied. Document the anomalies for further analysis, but do not allow them to distract from our primary mission. Over the next 3 days, the Cathar fleet established extraction points throughout the nebula, deliberately including areas the humans had been actively researching. Each time, the human vessels would adjust their positions, maintaining their operations while carefully avoiding direct confrontation. The humans continued to transmit formal diplomatic protests, each one meticulously documenting the Cathar incursions with language that grew progressively more stern but never crossed into explicit threats. Their behavior is inconsistent with our models, Lieutenant Kesmer reported during a strategy session. They show no signs of preparing for withdrawal, yet they avoid any actions that might provoke direct conflict. Admiral Forlag studied the tactical display, where a human supply ship was currently making its way toward the research outpost through a narrow corridor the Cathar had deliberately left open. Perhaps they require more direct instruction regarding our seriousness. He made his decision. Intercept the human supply vessel. Target its propulsion systems with a measured demonstration of our weapons. Disable it sufficiently to require assistance, but avoid destroying it. Supreme Governor Zalter has authorized proportional force to accelerate their compliance. The Cathar cruiser Logical Consequence moved to intercept, its weapon systems charging with precise calibration. The human supply ship, designated by its transponder as the UEDC resupply vessel Galileo, made no attempt to evade as the Cathar ship approached. Energy weapons at 20% capacity, reported the weapons officer aboard the Logical Consequence. Targeting solution acquired. Firing. Green energy beams lanced out, striking the Galileo's engine section with surgical precision. The human vessel shuddered, its shields flaring brightly before partially collapsing around the impact zone. Secondary explosions rippled along its port side as systems overloaded. Target has sustained significant damage, the sensor officer reported. Their propulsion system is offline. Life support remains functional. They are not returning fire. Admiral Forlag watched with satisfaction. The Cathar did not believe in wanton destruction. It was inefficient and wasteful. This measured response would demonstrate their resolve while giving the humans a clear path to the logical choice, withdrawal. But the Galileo's response was not what any Cathar had predicted. Rather than immediately calling for assistance or attempting to limp away from the confrontation, the damaged vessel maintained its position. Its remaining shield strengthened, and for several minutes, it appeared to be conducting internal repairs with unexpected efficiency. Admiral, the communications officer interrupted. The human vessel is transmitting. Not to us, but to their outpost. It's a highly encrypted burst transmission. Before Forlag could respond, the Galileo's engines suddenly flared to life, though clearly operating at reduced capacity. The vessel began a controlled, dignified withdrawal toward the human outpost, not fleeing in panic, but retreating with purpose. Should we pursue and complete its disablement? Asked his first officer. Forlag considered, but shook his head. Unnecessary. The demonstration has been made. They now understand that further resistance will result in escalating consequences. But within hours, it became clear that the humans had drawn very different conclusions from the encounter. The energy signatures from the human outpost and their remaining vessels intensified dramatically. More troubling, subspace communication activity spiked to unprecedented levels. They appear to be calling for reinforcements, Lieutenant Kesmer reported, unable to keep a note of concern from his voice. But according to our intelligence, the nearest significant human military presence is at least 6 days away at their maximum warp capacity. A predictable but futile gesture, Forlag replied. By the time any reinforcements could arrive, we will have established complete control of the nebula. Inform Supreme Governor Zalter of our successful demonstration and the humans' response. Recommend we prepare for Phase 2 operations to secure the research outpost itself. On his flagship, light years from the nebula, but connected through quantum communications, Supreme Governor Zalter received Forlag's report with satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to logical parameters. The attack on the supply ship had been precisely calculated, sufficient to demonstrate Cthar resolve without triggering a full military response that might complicate the situation. He was therefore surprised when, less than an hour later, his communications officer reported, "Supreme Governor, we are receiving an emergency diplomatic channel request from the human envoy. He insists on speaking with you directly and immediately." Zalter considered refusing, but decided there was value in hearing the humans' inevitably emotional response to their demonstration. Connect the channel. Alistair Finch appeared on screen, and Zalter immediately noticed something had changed. The envoy's diplomatic demeanor had transformed. His expression wasn't angry or distraught, as might be expected after the attack on their vessel. Instead, his face was utterly, eerily calm, a stillness that struck Zalter as uncharacteristic for humans. "Supreme Governor Zalter," Finch began, his voice devoid of its previous diplomatic warmth, "I am contacting you regarding the unprovoked attack on the UEDC vessel Galileo approximately 3 hours ago." "Envoy Finch," Zalter replied smoothly, "the action taken by Admiral Forlag was a measured response to your continued refusal to acknowledge Cthar authority in the Azure Nebula. The vessel was disabled, not destroyed, as a demonstration of our precision and restraint." Finch didn't blink. "Let me be perfectly clear about what has occurred. A Cthar warship fired upon an unarmed Earth supply vessel in Earth-administered space, causing casualties among the crew and significant damage to the ship. This action constitutes an act of war under United Earth law. Your legal constructs are irrelevant," Zalter countered. "The nebula is now under Cthar control. Your continued presence without our permission is the true provocation. The incident with your supply vessel need not be repeated if you begin evacuation procedures immediately." Finch was silent for a moment, his gaze unwavering. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to an even lower register. "Supreme Governor Zalter, we have made reasonable proposals. You have rejected them and chosen the path of violent escalation. We have attempted dialogue. Now we're done talking." The transmission ended abruptly, leaving Zalter momentarily disconcerted. Something about the human's tone had been distinctly unsettling. Not emotional as expected, but its opposite, a complete absence of emotion where it should have been present. Strategic Commander Mover, who had been observing the exchange, spoke hesitantly. "Supreme Governor, the envoy's final statement and demeanor were atypical for human diplomatic protocols." Zalter dismissed these concerns with a wave. "It is merely the final bluster of a representative who knows his position is untenable. They will withdraw once they accept the logic of their situation." He opened a channel to Admiral Forlag. "Admiral, you may proceed with preparations to secure the human research outpost. They have been formally notified of our intentions." Admiral Forlag acknowledged his orders and began deploying his fleet in a standard containment pattern around the human outpost. The operation was proceeding with Cthar precision when the sensor officer on his flagship suddenly called out in alarm. "Admiral, multiple subspace distortions forming throughout the nebula. Configuration unknown." Forlag moved swiftly to the sensor station. "Specify. Natural phenomena or artificial?" "Definitely artificial, sir. They're everywhere. Hundreds of distinct signatures, appearing simultaneously across a 70 light-second radius." Before Forlag could process this information, the communications officer added, "Sir, we're detecting massive subspace communications across all frequencies. Some are using encryption protocols we've never encountered." The tactical display that had shown such orderly Cthar dominance moments ago was now alight with new signatures appearing faster than the system could categorize them. The elegant geometric pattern of the Cthar fleet was suddenly dwarfed by a bewildering array of contacts emerging from what seemed like every direction, even from within the nebula itself, where the gases should have made such appearances impossible. "Full alert status. Forlag commanded. Activate all defense systems and establish communication with any vessels identifying themselves. But before his orders could be fully implemented, the subspace distortions resolved into hundreds, then thousands of starships. They were not the patrol craft or research vessels the Cthar had expected, but warships of every class in the human fleet, sleek destroyers, heavily armed cruisers, and massive capital ships that the Cthar intelligence had placed only in core human systems. "This is impossible," Forlag whispered, a very Unkara-like uncertainty creeping into his voice. "Their nearest military base is 6 days away at maximum warp." The answer came immediately through a broad-spectrum transmission directed at the entire Cthar fleet. A stern-faced human in a dark uniform with gold insignia appeared on every screen. "This is Admiral Eris Thorne of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Your forces have committed an act of war against Earth by firing upon the unarmed vessel Galileo. You are surrounded by the 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets of the UEDF. Lower your shields, power down your weapons, and prepare to be boarded. Any hostile action will be met with immediate and overwhelming force." Forlag stared at the tactical display in disbelief. The human warships had emerged in a perfect three-dimensional enclosure around the Cthar fleet, using the nebulous gases for concealment until the precise moment of revelation. There was no gap in their formation, no weakness to exploit. Most disturbing of all, many of the ships showed energy signatures that vastly exceeded what Cthar intelligence had indicated human technology could produce. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, voice strained, "analysis indicates we are outgunned by a factor of approximately 27 to 1. "Impossible," Forlag repeated. "Our intelligence was wrong," Lieutenant Kesmer finished, "or deliberately misled." Forlag's mind raced through options, all his careful Cthar logic struggling to find a solution to this unpredicted scenario. Establish communication with Supreme Governor Zalter immediately. Deploy countermeasures and prepare evasive protocols. But before these orders could be carried out, the human fleet acted with devastating coordination. Not with the expected barrage of weapons fire, but with something far more insidious. Cthar ships across the formation began reporting critical system failures as sophisticated electronic warfare suites penetrated their defenses with ease. "They're inside our command networks," shouted the operations officer. "Bypassing encryption we thought impenetrable. Systems failing shipwide." On the tactical display, Forlag watched in horror as Cthar vessels began to lose power, their shields collapsing, weapons going offline. 3 of his cruisers, suddenly defenseless, were swiftly disabled by precision strikes that surgically removed their propulsion and weapons capabilities without destroying the vessels. When the Cthar attempted to return fire, their weapons found human shields inexplicably resistant. The few successful hits seemed to do minimal damage against defenses that adapted with alarming speed. "Sir," Kesmer reported, his voice unnaturally steady in the chaos, "those anomalous energy readings we detected from their outpost and vessels over the past days, they weren't malfunctions or inefficiencies. They were scanning us, mapping our entire defensive and offensive capabilities, finding every vulnerability in our systems." Understanding dawned on Forlag with terrible clarity. The humans had never been negotiating from weakness. Their diplomatic persistence wasn't desperation, it was patience. They had been buying time, gathering intelligence, and positioning their forces while appearing harmlessly outmatched. "All vessels, execute Emergency Protocol Sigma 9, Forlag commanded. Disengage and retreat to Rally Point Delta." But the attempted retreat quickly became a rout. The human fleet, displaying tactical flexibility that defied Cthar battle doctrine, adapted instantly to the escape attempt. Ships that should have been too large to maneuver effectively moved with surprising agility, cutting off escape vectors. Smaller vessels deployed what appeared to be spatial distortion weapons that made conventional navigation impossible in targeted areas. Within 20 minutes of the human fleet's appearance, half of the Cthar expeditionary force had been disabled or captured. Admiral Forlag's flagship, the Inexorable Conclusion, found itself surrounded by 5 human cruisers, its primary systems failing as relentless electronic attacks overwhelmed its defenses. "Sir," his first officer reported with the resignation of one, stating the inevitable, "we can no longer maintain shields or weapons control. The humans are hailing us again." Admiral Thorne's face returned to the screen, still showing that same unnerving calm that Envoy Finch had displayed earlier. "Admiral Forlag, your situation is untenable. Surrender your vessel and order your remaining ships to stand down, or we will be forced to continue disabling them one by one." Forlag, his Kthar pride wounded but his logic still functioning, made the only rational choice. "This is Admiral Forlag of the Kthar Dominion. I surrender my vessel to United Earth Forces. All Kthar ships cease resistance immediately." Light years away, Supreme Governor Zalter watched in stunned silence as the quantum communications relayed the catastrophic defeat of his expeditionary fleet. His council chamber, normally a place of ordered deliberation, had descended into uncharacteristic disarray as reports flooded in of the overwhelming human military response. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his intelligence chief. "Your reports indicated they had minimal military presence in this sector." The data was correct, the intelligence chief insisted, though with less certainty than any Kthar would normally display. They concealed their true capabilities. The energy signatures that our analysts dismissed as inefficiencies, they were masking advanced weapons and drive systems. And they had forces hiding within the nebula itself, using technologies we've never encountered to shield themselves from our sensors. Strategic Commander Mover, ashen scaled with shock, added, "The human outpost was never just a research station. It was a forward military installation disguised as a scientific outpost, positioned there decades ago in anticipation of eventually encountering species like us." Science Director Krell, who had initially questioned the wisdom of confronting the humans, spoke with quiet devastation. "We misunderstood them fundamentally. Their diplomatic persistence wasn't weakness. It was their authentic preference. They genuinely wished to avoid conflict, not because they feared us, but because they considered it unnecessary." Zalter was still struggling to process this reversal when his communications officer announced, "Supreme Governor, we are receiving a transmission from the human fleet. Admiral Thorne wishes to speak with you directly." With no logical alternative, Zalter accepted the transmission. Admiral Thorne appeared on screen, his uniform immaculate, his expression resolute but not triumphant. "Supreme Governor Zalter, the situation in the Azure Nebula has been resolved. Your expeditionary fleet has surrendered and is being secured by UEDF forces. I am authorized to present the following terms. All Kthar forces will withdraw from the Azure Nebula and a 10-light-year buffer zone around it. All claims to the region are hereby nullified. Your personnel will be returned to Kthar space following verification of your compliance with these terms." Zalter, trained throughout his life to find logical responses to any situation, found himself momentarily speechless. When he finally spoke, his voice lacked its usual authoritative resonance. "You concealed your true military capabilities from us." Admiral Thorne's expression didn't change. "We concealed nothing. Your assumptions about our capabilities were your own. We maintained substantial forces throughout Earth-administered space, particularly around valuable research installations. This is neither secret nor hidden from legitimate diplomatic inquiries. Then why engage in prolonged negotiations if you possess such overwhelming force?" Zalter demanded, genuinely unable to comprehend the human logic. "Because we meant what we said, Governor," Thorne replied simply. "We preferred a diplomatic solution. War is wasteful, destructive, and unnecessary when reasonable alternatives exist." Envoy Finch was entirely sincere in his proposals for shared access and cooperative research. "Your decision to resort to violence rather than continue dialogue forced our hand." Thorne leaned slightly forward, his calm expression unchanged but somehow more intense. This outcome was entirely avoidable. With that simple statement, devoid of gloating, threats, or emotional display, Zalter finally understood the fundamental error in Cthar logic regarding humans. What the Cthar had interpreted as emotional weakness was actually a different form of strength. The human's willingness to negotiate wasn't born of fear, but of choice, a genuine preference for cooperation that existed alongside, not in place of, the capacity for overwhelming military action. More disturbing still was the realization of what the envoy's final statement had truly signified. "We're done talking" wasn't an emotional outburst or empty threat. It was a status update, a simple notification that one phase of interaction had ended and another had begun. The eerie calm that accompanied it wasn't a mask for fear, but the focused concentration of species switching from their preferred diplomatic mode to precise, calculated military action. "We accept your terms, Admiral Thorne," Zalter finally replied, his voice hollow with the weight of revelation. "Cthar forces will withdraw as specified." "Very good," Thorne nodded. "We will begin processing your personnel for return immediately. Once withdrawal is complete, we would be open to resuming diplomatic discussions regarding the potential for future scientific cooperation in the region, should the Cthar Dominion be interested." The transmission ended, leaving Zalter facing his council in silence. The chamber remained quiet for long moments before Science Director Krell spoke. "We must reassess all our assumptions about humans," he said quietly. "Their capacity to compartmentalize, to genuinely prefer peaceful negotiation while maintaining readiness for devastating military action, is unlike anything in our experience." Strategic Commander Mover nodded slowly. The calm they displayed when transitioning from diplomacy to combat. It was not what we expected from emotional species. There was no rage, no vengeance, only methodical efficiency. "It is perhaps the most frightening thing I have ever witnessed," Lieutenant Kesmer added from his position at the tactical display. "Not their weapons or numbers, but that moment of transition, that eerie calm that falls when human commanders say we're done talking." Zalter, his pride wounded, but his analytical mind still functioning, began to understand that the Cthar had encountered something their logic had failed to categorize properly. Humans were indeed emotional beings, but they had developed a capacity to channel those emotions with devastating effectiveness when required. Their preference for diplomacy wasn't weakness, but efficiency, war being recognized as costly and wasteful compared to mutual cooperation. Most disturbing of all was the realization that this entire confrontation had likely been documented, analyzed, and would be used to inform future human diplomatic and military strategies. They were adaptive in ways the Cthar had failed to anticipate. "We have much to learn," Zalter finally said, "about the true nature of humans. Our logic was incomplete." It was perhaps the closest a Cthar could come to admitting fear. The recognition that they had fundamentally misunderstood a species capable of both sincere diplomatic outreach and coldly efficient military action. A species that would patiently exhaust every peaceful option, but when they finally said they were done talking, it wasn't an emotional declaration, but a simple statement of fact, a final status update before unleashing precisely calculated destruction. In the days that followed, as Cthar prisoners were processed for return and their damaged vessels recovered or salvaged, this lesson echoed through every level of the Cthar Dominion. The story spread of the terrifying stillness that had come over the human diplomats before the storm broke. That moment of eerie calm that signaled not surrender, but the end of one approach and the seamless transition to another. It was a lesson the Cthar would not soon forget. When dealing with humans, their preference for talk is genuine. But when they say they're done talking, what follows is not emotional chaos, but something far more frightening. Focused, efficient action delivered with an almost Cthar-like precision, but guided by an adaptability the Cthar could barely comprehend. Long after the Azure Nebula crisis had ended, Cthar diplomats and strategists would remind each other of this with a saying that entered their lexicon: "Beware the human who stops talking, for that is when they are most dangerous."